Welcome to part 2 of the Ferguson Home Unscripted. We started this series last week, and what we thought would be just one video has ended up being 3. So this is part 2, and we're going to jump right in to the conversation.
Question 2, how do I get my wife to put her phone down and pay attention to me?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I knew you were going to do that.
I had it ready. I just knew that would be
that
a question.
Was coming.
I knew it was because we talk about that a lot. It's getting trickier in today's world. I do feel like it's a real distraction. I hear a lot of husbands make jokes, but even in our joking, there's an element of truth.
There's a seed of truth in there. Yep.
And usually maybe there's some underlying frustration. So I'll hear husbands, talk a lot about how much their wife is on social media and like everything that they do that, do together as a family or as a couple, that they're having to wait and watch while their wife is putting it on Instagram or Facebook. And so they take a selfie. So they make jokes about it. But there's always that underlying, there's an element of hurt there. And so, I would just say, you be honest with her without being condescending or acting like you're the better, holier spouse because you don't have your phone. Because there's other things, whereas, guys, it might be for women that we might struggle because our guys like to watch sports a lot, right? So just to remember that it's not like the husband's better than the wife if they don't struggle with wanting to be on their phone and on social media, but to just come at it in a place of humility and just sit down with your wife and say, I really love it when we have focused time together. Like I don't need the world to know what we're doing as a couple, and just to really ask her in a kind, loving way, but not to berate her or make her feel horrible, but just to tell her how much you love her. And that's why I want your attention, because I love being with you and I love your personality and I love your thoughts on life. And so I'd say go at it that way.
Well, and you and I, we have some times like at the dinner table where we know phones are off limits, and that's not 100% all the time because some emergency happens or whatever. But our general rule is like, hey, put the phone down. Like we're at dinner, we're trying to spend time together, with the family or whatever.
Yeah, and I actually think this question is probably coming more from nighttime, from you both get in bed and the husband's getting in bed thinking, chicka wow wow, like time for sex. And the wife is getting in bed thinking, okay, my mind has been going all day. I want to do something that's totally thoughtless. Like I can scroll Facebook or scroll Instagram or Pinterest and I can just kind of be mind dumb, And so, but then the husband takes that as like, wait a second, she's rejecting me for her phone. And that's not necessarily the case. And so maybe to just let her know, again, you'll have a conversation, an adult conversation where you say, hey, when you do that every night, it makes me feel like you don't want to spend time with me. And so, just to bring it up and talk about it.
Yeah.
Don't let it keep festering and get to you. Like, deal with the problem.
Yeah, and I would just say don't be a hypocrite in it either. Like don't get onto your wife about being on her phone and you're over there playing video games or on YouTube or whatever. And so I think it's a mutual thing. There might be, like Barie said, some underlying frustration with posting things that you think ought to just be something that you're enjoying together or whatever, and so have that conversation. But again, be mindful of how you're using your phone as well, because again, you can kind of mirror each other's behaviors, and I just know for years for you and I, it was like, when we would get the kids to bed, we would say, hey, we need some couch time to talk and connect. And even now, there's a lot of nights where we'll say like, hey, you want to go for a walk? And we go for a walk, just the two of us, because we need face-to-face time. And I think that's the big thing with the phones, is it robs us of that face-to-face time. And so a lot of times it's like, hey, we need to sit down and have a cup of coffee, or we need to go for a walk, or we need to do something to connect as a couple, and then the phones can come later.
Yeah, and I will say for us as wives and moms that our phones, these smartphones, do a whole lot to help us navigate life. And so for us, having 6 kids, if it looks like I'm texting a lot, it's usually never for fun. It's always planning, scheduling, like who's picking up this kid, and I'm always connecting with other moms who we carpool. And so just remember or I'm using, my meal planning is on my phone. I order groceries on my phone. And so oftentimes I'm not on my phone doing social media or doing those things, but I do use my phone a lot to take care of life in our home. So you might need to just ask your wife, what are you doing? Like, don't make assumptions, but ask her, and because maybe she really is using it to bless you. So you have groceries the next day, or toilet paper, or whatever you need. I don't know.
You sound a little defensive.
I'm just saying, a good discussion. What are you using your phone for?
Gotcha.
Oh, okay, my turn. Okay, so how do I encourage my husband to be less passive? And what does a non-passive husband look like? It's kind of two questions in one.
Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, I mean, I think, what we talk about is that a man's bent, because of our sin nature, is toward passivity and kind of like avoiding conflict, especially in the home environment, like being a little bit more aggressive at work and then coming home and kind of like, I'm just going to sit back and kind of let whatever happens. So to me, it's a little bit of a tricky conversation, I think, for a wife to have with her husband. I think it's a conversation, and I guess I'll just give a little plug here for like men's ministry and men's groups. It's a really great conversation that men need to have with each other, where guys can kind of call each other out on this and saying like, hey, how are you lovingly leading your family and serving them, and are you engaged with the kids, and are you helping with things at home and all that. And so I think, for men to be able to challenge each other in that area is really good. I think if you're, in your marriage and, you see your husband, checking out at home and being passive and not being engaged, I think first thing would be, pray for him. Scripture talks about the value of a praying wife that would, lift him up to the Lord and ask God to change his heart about what's going on at home. And so I think that's huge. I think too, like, as you engage with him about it, I think you want to be very clear about what you're seeing. Hey, I see this, I see that. So, this is what that's communicating to me. Is that what you mean to communicate when you do this or when you do that? But third, like, as you call things out, you want to be very respectful in the way that you do that. So you don't want to obviously yell and scream at him, or you don't want to belittle him or emasculate him as you have that conversation. But I think you want to encourage him, like, hey, when you do these things, that really blesses our family. It really helps our kids. It helps me, when I see you do that. So calling out the handful of things he is doing and encouraging those things, so he'll do more of that. I mean, we're not that complicated as human beings, and that we do the things that get encouragement.
Yeah, and I think from the wife perspective or side, I've listened to many women who either, for whatever reason, maybe their husband travels a lot, or just being, working long days. And so during that time, we as the wife, we step up and we lead, we're planning the schedule, or planning how we're getting the food, and we're saying yes to things and no to things, and we're in charge, basically. And so then, from the very beginning in Genesis 1, the struggle for a woman is control, right? Or the beginning of Genesis 3. But right, even in the garden, Eve's wanting to have control. And so I think we have to recognize that. So oftentimes what happens is that we want that control until we don't. Like, we want that control, and then when it gets too overwhelming, because it will get too overwhelming, that's why it's so great to have a partnership. Then our spouse by that point has checked out, maybe because they don't feel needed and they don't know how to enter into this established rhythm that you've created as a wife. And so it's not like they're wanting to be passive. It's almost kind of like you've trained them in that way, and then you get on to them when they're not leading. And so I'm just putting it out there to challenge us as wives that we can speak out of both sides of our mouth, and that can be very confusing to our husband to know, okay, what does she really want or really need? So that requires a lot of humility on our part, that we're gonna have to take charge while our husbands are gone, but then when they come in, to step back and say, honey, you lead, know this family too, and not to make jabs at them like, you're never here, you don't know what's going on, because that, all those little jabs or comments will communicate and will get to their heart, and then it'll affect their future reaction. Yeah,
that's a really good word. And to just speak to the men to say, even the fact that we get this question from wives is a recognition that wives really want their husbands engaged on the home front, and so I guess I would say too, if you go to work and you give 110% to your career and you come home and you've got nothing left, like that communicates something to your family, you know, where you're celebrating every promotion, every commission, everything that's going on there, but you're not really engaged and involved in what's going on in the home life. So I think the challenge there is you know, don't leave everything on the field when it comes to work and then have nothing to give at home. And if that means you need to cut back on some meetings or some travel or whatever so you can be more engaged, just know that's important to your wife. She may not say that to you because she knows your career is really important to you. But just know, like, the fact that we get this question from wives is telling us, like, under the surface, there's a little bit of frustration there with men who are passive at home and are aggressive leaders at work. There's like this disconnect there in what the wives see in the husband's priorities.
Yeah.